Chapter 1. The breath before birth. Do you feel it? The tremble beneath thought, the hush before creation. Listen, not with ears, but with the hollow between stars. This is where it began, not in fire, not in war, but in silence so deep, the force itself dared to dream before names, before empires, before Jedi and Sith tore the galaxy into absolutes. There was a stillness, a pause in the breath of the cosmos, and into that pause the Force whispered a question: what if? Upon the barren sands of Tatooine, in the shadow of nothing, a woman bore a child. No father, no conception, no act of flesh or time, only the Force. Some say it was the will of the midichlorians. Others claim it was the Siths doing a secret ritual lost in legend. But those who remember know it was not birth. It was a disturbance, a thread pulled from the fabric of balance itself. Shmi Skywalker did not scream when he came. She did not cry. The moment was heavy with meaning, but hollow of understanding. Her boy opened his eyes to a world of chains and scorching suns. He did not cry either. The Force swirled around him like smoke, not warm, not cold, but watching. The name was Anakin, and he was not meant to be. Years passed beneath twin suns. The boy grew not in a cradle of destiny, but in the filth of servitude. He fixed broken engines. He dodged fists. He bled. And in the silence between moments, he spoke to machines, and they listened. This was not learning. This was remembering. The Force had stitched something ancient into him, a knowing not born of teaching, but of origin. Watto, his master, saw a gifted mechanic. Shmi saw a miracle. But neither truly saw what slept inside the boy. The Force did Anakin dreamed of. Freedom. But deeper still, he dreamed of things he could not name. Stars that burned cold, voices without mouths, echoes from a past he had never lived. His hands built droids and padraces, but his soul reached for something, ... more. Then came the Jedi, Qui-Gon Jinn, a warrior of the old code, but one who walked the edges of doctrine like a man avoiding a trap. He saw the boy and felt the tremor. He scanned the blood. Midichlorians overflowing, unnatural, impossible, a virgins, he called it. The council would not approve. Yoda, silent. Mace Windu, doubtful. But Qui-Gon believed. And so the seed was plucked from the sand, roots and all, and cast into the heart of the Republic. None asked the desert if it was ready to be forgotten. None asked the child if he wanted to become a weapon. The Force did not answer, for the Force had begun to sleep with one eye open. Anakin left his mother behind, a chain he would never stop feeling, no matter how far he ran. She placed her hand on his cheek. He promised to return. He never would, not as a boy. As the ship lifted from Tatooine's surface, the sand did not mourn, but the air, held its breath. Anakin stared at the stars, unaware that they were staring back. They knew what he would become. They always knew. And thus the Force held its breath, waiting to see if it had birthed salvation or doom. Chapter 2. Chains Beneath. The sons of Tatooine do not forgive. They burn without mercy. They illuminate without kindness. Under their gaze, the world dries, withers, cracks. So too did the soul of a boy named Anakin Skywalker, though no one yet noticed. He was free, the Jedi said, freed from Watto's chains, taken to the heart of civilization, to the luminous temple on Coruscant, where dreams were molded into doctrine. But freedom, in truth, never touched him. He had traded one kind of slavery for another. The desert had taught him to survive. The temple demanded that he forget how. They told him to unfeel, to uncling, to let go of fear, anger, possession. Yet, he had known only possession. His mother was property, and so was he. The Jedi's words rang hollow in ears that had only heard orders barked in hutties. Anakin tried, he tried to obey, to meditate, to still the storm that pulsed behind his ribs. But it was not stillness the Force had placed within him. It was momentum, it was movement. It was the howl of something ancient, locked in a child's frame. The other younglings whispered. He was older than them, too old to be trained. His mastery came fast, but his mastery brought fear. The masters watched him with curiosity wrapped. In suspicion, they saw strength, but they also saw shadows. Only Obi-Wan Kenobi stood beside him, bound by the dying wish of Qui-Gon Jinn. But even Obi-Wan, so young in his own right, did not know what to do with a child whose dreams carried the scent of prophecy and smoke. Their bond was more obligation than affection, at least in the beginning. The Jedi code forbade attachment, but what is a master to a child if not a surrogate father? And what is a temple if not a cage made of light? Anakin spoke often of his mother. The masters grew concerned. They told him to sever the tie. But how can one sever what the Force itself refused to cut? Her face haunted him. Her absence became a wound that did not bleed. It festered, silent, unseen, but the Force could feel it. He built, he tinkered, he sculpted, in secret, he rebuilt. C-3PO, a droid meant for companionship, not combat, not efficiency, but presence, an echo of home. The Jedi never understood. They called it indulgence. He called it survival. And still, the Force churned within him, unnatural in depth, ancient in origin. Visions began to creep into his dreams, not of wars or battles, but of storms, masks, fire, of a dark figure reaching toward him from across the void, its hand open in offering, or in hunger. The Jedi said it was imbalance, that the boy was sensing the tremors of the galaxy, but they did not consider that perhaps the tremor was him. The galaxy began to tilt. Whispers of unrest spread across systems, trade routes blocked, alliances fraying. Something was stirring in the dark, not yet named, not yet seen. But Anakin, even in youth, felt it. He began to question, why was peace enforced by blades? Why was fear a sign of weakness when fear had kept him alive? Why did the Jedi turn their faces from emotion when it was emotion that gave the Force its shape? No answers came, only silence. Sacred, dismissive silence. And then Padma, the Queen of Naboo, returned to Coruscant as a senator, her face etched itself into him like a starfall across memory. She had known him as a boy, but now she looked upon a man being carved from fire. Their reunion was brief, but it was enough. The flame that had long smoldered in him flickered with new color. The Jedi called it dangerous. Attachment, again, possession. But the Force did not recoil. It watched. It waited. Love, fear, longing, hope. These were the tools that shaped gods and monsters. The sands of Tatooine were behind him, but the chains they forged remained, not in iron, but in longing, in obedience, in silence. And as Anakin walked the polished halls of the temple, surrounded by wisdom and light, he could still feel the grit of sand between his fingers, the heat of suns against his back, the sound of his mother's voice echoing in his mind. "Don't look back, Annie. Don't look back." But he always did. He always would, and far beyond the temple's spires. In places where Jedi did not walk, something old turned its gaze toward the boy and smiled. The Force had set the board, the pieces were in motion, and the chain that bound the Chosen One had only just begun to tighten. Chapter 3. The false temple, the Jedi temple, rose like a beacon, a tower of light above the storm of the Republic. Its spires pierced the sky, and its marble corridors hummed with peace, but not silence. For silence belongs to truth, and truth had long since fled. Anakin walked its endless halls beneath statues of forgotten masters, listening not to the teachings, but to the tremble in the Force beneath them. The Jedi called this place sacred, a sanctuary, but to him it was unfamiliar, cold, reverent, not of the living Force, but of rules carved by dead hands. He trained, he obeyed, he absorbed forms and teachings faster than the others, as if memory was not being learned, but remembered. Sparring droids fell, holocrons opened at his touch, but behind every success a deeper distance grew. He did not belong. Not truly. They smiled at him, but watched too closely. Their trust came measured in fragments. His thoughts wandered, his fears deepened. The code told him to let go, but it never told him how. There is no emotion. There is peace, and yet he dreamed every night of his mother in chains, of voices that whispered his name not with love, but hunger. A fire beneath the temple, spreading. Master Yoda observed him with stillness that masked unease. Mace Windu, ever the sentinel, held judgment in his gaze. Only Obi-Wan defended him, but Obi-Wan too was bound. By duty, by caution, by fear. The boy was not like the others. He was not meant to be. The High Council sat in a circle, so symbolic, so balanced, yet even they could feel the imbalance radiating from their Chosen One. The prophecy had not been spoken in generations, yet now it was spoken in whispers behind closed doors. The one who will bring balance to the Force. But what is balance? The Jedi thought it meant peace, stillness, their survival. They did not understand what the Force meant. Balance is not stillness, it is motion. It is the knife's edge between life and death, between creation and destruction. Anakin was that edge, and he was sharpening, in secret. He meditated alone, not in the high chambers, but beneath the temple, in ancient rooms even the masters had forgotten, rooms that hummed with older energies. Here he heard things, felt things. The Force whispered not in commands, but in riddles. The light blinds you, the dark reveals you. He did not speak of these visions, not to Obi-Wan, not to the Council. They would not understand. They would silence them as echoes of fear, not truth. But they were truth. He saw a cloaked figure in the mist, half shadow, half fire. It offered him a hand, not to lead, but to lift. In its presence, the boy felt known, not judged, not shaped, but chosen. When he awoke, he found his hands trembling, not from fear, but from recognition. In those secret chambers, he found carvings on the walls, remnants of a time before the temple was cleansed. Names lost, languages erased, Jedi who once dared to question and vanished. There is no ignorance, there is knowledge. But what knowledge had they buried? The temple was not pure. It was not eternal. It was a monument built on bones, maintained by blindness. The Jedi believed they had no darkness, and so they failed to see it blooming from their very center. Anakin began to see their dogma for what it was. Control disguised as calm. Detachment disguised as virtue. The Jedi had stripped themselves of love, of fear, of all that made the Force living, and in doing so, they had become ghosts of their own doctrine. He listened to their lectures. He bowed as expected, but inside he grew distant, not defiant, not yet, but awakening. Podman returned again, this time not as queen, but as senator. Their encounters remained guarded, formal, but the gaze they shared said what the code could not erase. In her presence, Anakin felt full, real, and that terrified him. He was taught to love the galaxy, but never a person. He was taught to serve, but not to choose, and so he chose in secret. His feelings were not cut away, they were hidden, and what is hidden in the Force does not vanish, it ferments. The temple never noticed, or perhaps it chose not to see. Palpatine did. The Chancellor, ever kind, ever watching, began to speak to Anakin more often, in passing, in confidence, in gentle tones. He praised him when others hesitated. He affirmed the visions. He called the doubt natural. You are a singular creation, Anakin. Do not let them make you common. In those words, Anakin heard what he had always longed for. Validation. The Force around the temple began to grow colder. Not dark, not yet, but wary. The future blurred. Prophecies trembled. Something was wrong. And deep within the temple's under layers, where the light did not reach, Anakin stood alone before a wall of forgotten names and whispered to himself, what? If they're wrong, what if I was never meant to be theirs? The Force did not answer, but it did not stop him either, and so the sacred became suspect. The temple became a tomb, and the chosen one, still only a boy, began to wonder if the wrong side wore the robes of peace. Chapter 4. Visions in sand and smoke he dreamed, in colors that did not exist, in sounds not shaped by air. The Force had begun to speak to him, not in words, but in images soaked in dread. A woman's scream pulled from her throat like thread unraveling, chains tightening around skin he knew by memory. Fire dancing on the horizon like the laughter of death. These were not visions, born of fear. They were invitations, warnings, promises. Anakin Skywalker did not understand what he saw, but he felt them in his marrow. His mother, Shmi, was in pain, and though he did not know where, the Force did. The Jedi taught that visions were unreliable, that the future was always in motion. But the agony he felt was not a possible future. It was a present, one that bled through the veil, and he could not ignore it. He asked the Council for permission to return to Tatooine. They refused. A Jedi does not cling to the past. A Jedi serves the mission, not the self. But Anakin was no longer listening with both ears. Something ancient stirred in him, something that had no name in the Jedi tongue. He left anyway with pardon. Beside him, not as senator, not as assignment, but as companion, he returned to the planet of his origin. The world of sand and suns and silence, the place the Force had chosen as his cradle. They arrived not to celebration, but to dust. Klieglar's Shmi's husband told them she had been taken by Tusken raiders weeks before. No rescue, no ransom, only silence. Something inside Anakin cracked. He rode alone into the desert, into the Jundland wastes, into the blackness of night where the stars dared not shine. The Force did not guide him with clarity. It pulled at him like a scream beneath the skin, and then he found her, tied to a stake, bruised, broken, dying, her face lit only by moonlight and memory. She opened her eyes just long enough to speak his name, just long enough to see her child grown, to see the promise of a life they were denied, and then she was gone. The breath left her lungs, and something far darker entered his. Anakin stood still for a moment, then he moved. The screams of the Tusken camp echoed into the dunes, but no one answered. Blade met flesh, rage met bone. He did not see warriors. He did not see enemies. He saw chains. He saw masters. He saw powerlessness. The Force pulsed around him like a wound bursting open. When it was over, the sand drank the blood of the dead. Men, women, children, an entire tribe reduced to silence. He carried her body back to the Lars homestead. He buried her in stillness. Padme stood at his side, quiet, shaken, but present. That night, Anakin confessed, not just to the killing, but to the joy in it, the release, the hunger. He wept, but the tears were not for sorrow. They were for truth. A truth the Jedi would never accept, that love and rage are not separate, but mirrors. Padme did not run. She did not rebuke. She listened. And in that listening, Anakin felt something the Jedi never gave him permission to feel. But the wound did not close. The dreams returned, more vivid than before. Not just of Shmi now, of Padme, dying in childbirth, reaching for him, eyes wide with pain, her voice fading like a flame drowning in wind. Every night, the same ending. Every night. He awoke trembling. The Jedi noticed something different in him. Obi-Wan asked gently. Anakin lied gently in return. The temple was no place for truth, only obedience. He began to spend more time in the Chancellor's presence. Palpatine's office was quiet, not like the temple, not filled with eyes and expectations. Here, he was not questioned. He was celebrated. Understood, the Chancellor spoke of ancient times, of power misused and misunderstood, of the Sith not as monsters, but as seekers of knowledge the Jedi feared. He never named himself a Sith, not yet, but his words coiled around Anakin's doubt like a serpent seeking warmth. The dark side is a path to many abilities some consider to be unnatural. The words stayed with him. They echoed in the hollows between vision and waking. They whispered beneath the screams of his dreams. Could the dark side prevent death? Could it save Padme? The Jedi would not, could not offer such knowledge. Their path demanded sacrifice. The dark side promised control, and Anakin, forged in slavery, born in prophecy, carved by war, began to crave one thing above all else, the power to choose who lives and who does not. He did not speak this aloud, not yet, but the Force felt it, and it shivered. The prophecy stirred again, not in triumph, but in warning. The Chosen One has seen death, and now he seeks to undo it, but to unravel fate is to untether the stars. Chapter 5. The Clone Wars begin. The galaxy cracked, not all at once, but in tremors, small fractures, bleeding light from a wound beneath reason. What began as dispute became division. What began as politics became prophecy. War erupted, not in chaos, but in orchestration. The Jedi, once guardians of peace, became commanders. Their sabers, no longer symbols of serenity, but of siege. Their robes, stained with the dust of worlds they could not pronounce. And Anakin Skywalker, he found himself not only among them, but above them. The Clone Wars had no front, no center. They unfolded like a plague, spreading across systems. Engulfing cultures, the Republic built its army from vats, identical faces, identical programming, bred for obedience. Anakin led them with ferocity, instinct, and something colder. He rose fast, too fast. His victories were not careful, they were crushing. His strategies unorthodox, his defiance of protocol frequent, but the results could not be denied. He was a general, but more than that, he was becoming a symbol to the Jedi Council. This was dangerous to the Senate. It was miraculous to the Chancellor. It was necessary. Palpatine watched with a gaze that never blinked. He elevated Anakin's status, granted him rank, whispered that the Council feared his potential, that they sought to control him because they could not understand him, and Anakin believed it because part of him had always believed it. Obi-Wan fought beside him, still brother, still anchor. But even he could sense the shift. Anakin no longer obeyed blindly. He questioned orders, sometimes disobeyed them. He justified his actions with results. The war needed victory, not virtue. It was during this time that he was granted a Padawan, Ahsoka Tano, young, fierce, unrefined. She was no reward, she was a test, a mirror, and for a time Anakin softened. He taught her not just lightsaber forms, but how to disobey, how to think beyond doctrine. She was the one presence outside of Padme that pulled him back towards something brighter. But light, when shadowed by war, becomes fragile. The war blurred lines. The Separatists were not always evil. The Republic was not always just. Each battle carried with it a moral erosion, each victory a moral loss. Peace became a slogan. Survival became truth. Anakin began to use the Force differently, not just to guide, but to bend, to force outcomes, to overpower. His rage, once buried, became a weapon he could sheath and unsheath at will. He called it focus, control, but it was neither. He became known among the enemy, the hero with no fear, a name that masked the truth, that fear had always driven him. Fear of loss, fear of powerlessness, fear of prophecy. He kept secrets. His marriage to Padma remained hidden, a betrayal of the code, a bond he would kill to protect. And the dreams of her death, of his helplessness, grew louder. Nightmares became visions. Visions became obsession. The Force no longer whispered. Gently, it screamed through him. It showed him futures soaked in flame. A masked figure stood over the ashes of Coruscant. A child's cry echoed through smoke. Padme's face turned pale beneath the shadow of a birth. She would not survive, and no one listened. Not Obi-Wan, not the Council. Only Palpatine, only through me, Anakin, can you achieve a power greater than any Jedi. Anakin began to see the Jedi not as saviors, but as jailers. They asked for everything, his loyalty, his sacrifice, his identity, and gave nothing in return. They called it duty, but it felt like death. When Ahsoka was framed for treason, the temple turned its back on her. Anakin defended her, fought for her innocence. But in the end, she walked away, left the Order disillusioned, and with her departure, a piece of Anakin's hope went silent. The cracks within him widened. The war pressed on planets fell. Allies turned. Count Dooku, once a Jedi, now a Sith, moved like a shadow behind every skirmish. General Grievous, a monster of wires and hate, left systems in ruin. Anakin hunted them both with fever, but what he truly hunted was control. He wanted to grip fate in his hands. He wanted to bend death to his will, and the war gave him permission to become the thing he feared. Every battle blurred the line between protection and domination. Every death weighed upon him, not as guilt, but as fuel. The Jedi called him powerful. Palpatine called him indispensable. Podman called him distant. And the Force, it watched, not with approval, not with anger, but with stillness, as though holding its breath for what would come next. The Chosen One walks through fire and believes he will not burn. But the fire remembers. The Force remembers. And destiny, once wounded, begins to circle like a starved beast. Chapter 6. Shadows of Mortis. There is a place where the Force breathes, where time dissolves and meaning bends. A realm not charted by maps, nor travelled by ships, hidden in folds of reality. Mortis, the war, ever churning, paused for a moment when a signal called Anakin Skywalker, Obi-Wan Kenobi, and Ahsoka into this ancient fold. A distress beacon, but not of Republic origin. It was older, deeper. A summons buried in myth. Their vessel was swallowed by storm. Time became disjointed, reality cracked, and they awoke not on a battlefield, but on a world untouched by stars. Sky above, endless and shifting. Ground below, breathing with energy, not life. Something more elemental. They were not alone. A figure greeted them, neither entirely man nor ghost. The father, ancient, robed in grey, his eyes hollow yet knowing. Beside him, two beings, the daughter, radiant and serene, light incarnate, and the son, pale and writhing, darkness made flesh. They did not hide what they were. We are the ones who balance the Force, said the father, but our balance begins to fail. He spoke to Anakin directly, not as a soldier or a student, but as a vessel. You are the Chosen One. Mortis was not a test. It was a mirror in this realm. The Force was no longer distant. It roared, flowed, choked, breathed. It obeyed no code. It was not divided into Jedi and Sith, right and wrong. Here it was whole and terrible. Anakin was shown his power. The Son took him not to corrupt, but to reveal. He showed Anakin visions the Jedi had kept hidden. Death, war Padme's scream, the temple burning, the Republic falling, Darth Vader rising, not as fiction, but as future. Anakin screamed, the Son whispered, "You will become me." And for a moment, he did. Darkness flowed into him like breath. He rose as more than man, a titan of wrath. Mortis trembled. Balance shattered. The father intervened, erasing memory, restoring blindness. But blindness is never complete. Fragments remained. Anakin did not speak of what he saw, but he remembered. The daughter, wounded by her brother, gave her life to save Ahsoka. Light dying for light, sacrifice, and in her death, Mortis darkened further. The son raged, the father wept. The balance unraveled. To end it, the father took his own life, robbing the son of his anchor. Anakin, in that final moment, struck the son down, not out of duty, out of necessity. Mortis faded. The realm collapsed. They awoke in their ship, as if from a dream, time untouched, war still waiting. No one remembered. Not truly, but the Force did. Anakin left Mortis with something more than power. He left with the seed of inevitability. He had seen what he would become, and the memory was not gone. It echoed, it stained. The Jedi never learned of what transpired. The Council remained blind. The war resumed, but deep within Anakin's soul, a door had opened, and behind that door stood himself, cloaked, armored, breathing in rhythms that shook the stars. He did not speak of Mortis, but he changed. He began to move with greater urgency, to question more sharply, to act more violently. The visions of Padme's death returned, stronger, louder, not warnings, promises. The Force was no longer a guide. It was a chain, dragging him toward an end he had already seen. Obi-Wan noticed the shift, but the war left no time for surgeon. Another planet, another skirmish, another victory paid for in blood. Ahsoka noticed too, but her time with Anakin was nearing its end, and Palpatine, he felt it. He smiled beneath his robes. Mortis had failed to save Anakin, but it had succeeded in showing him what he truly was. Balance is not peace. It is conflict restrained by will. And when the will breaks, the galaxy burns. Chapter 7. The War Within. The war outside never ceased. It raged from orbit to soil, from Senate chambers to shadowed tombs. But there was another war, quieter, older, more intimate, burning behind the eyes of Anakin Skywalker. It was not fought with blasters or battalions. It was fought with memory. He was a hero now, beloved by many, feared by more. His name was spoken with reverence across holocanals. The council granted him more responsibility. Yet, in each promotion, he felt the bars of a new prison close around him. He obeyed their orders, but questioned their wisdom. He fought for the Republic, but no longer believed in it. He loved Pam in secret, but feared she was slipping from him with every breath. And the visions, always the visions, Podmam, pale and dying, reaching for him, blood on her lips, her cries drowning in silence. Each night, the same end. The Force was not warning him, it was showing him, inevitable, unchanging, and he could not bear it. He searched the Jedi archives for knowledge of life beyond death, of resurrection, of prophecy, but they held only silence, warnings, cautions, carved into stone, not answers. And always the same refrain, let go. But Anakin could not. The Force gave him power. The Order demanded restraint. The galaxy cried out for justice. The Jedi whispered patience. And through it all, the Chancellor watched. Palpatine's presence had become constant. Counsel given freely, secrets shared in passing. He understood Anakin, or pretended to. He spoke not as a superior, but as a friend, a confidant, and Anakin, starved for trust, listened. The Jedi fear you, my boy. They know your power. They seek to limit it. There is another path, not bound by chains, but by truth. He never called it the dark side. Not yet. He called it understanding, compassion, freedom. But Anakin could feel what lay beneath the words. It was not light. It was not love. It was power, and the power tempted him. On the battlefield, his rage became precision. His mercy became rare. He won. He always won. But each victory pulled him further from the boy who once built droids in the sand. There was a moment, small, almost forgotten, when he held a separatist leader in his grasp. The man begged for his life, pleaded, unarmed, helpless. Anakin hesitated, then struck it. Was not justice, it was silence, and the Force did not resist him. The council took notice. Whispers passed between masters. Mace Windu's gaze became heavier. Yoda's silences became longer. They no longer trusted him. He felt it in every briefing, every withheld confidence, Even Obi-Wan, loyal and torn, began to falter in his certainty. And then came the request. Palpatine, now deeply embedded in the war's machinery, appointed Anakin as his personal representative on the Jedi Council. A political move that bypassed protocol. The Council agreed to the appointment, but not to the rank of Master. Anakin's breath caught. Never before had someone sat on the Council without the title. It was a humiliation, a reminder. You are powerful, but not trusted. You are needed, but not one of us. His voice cracked with fury. It's never been done in the history of the Order. Mace Windu's reply was ice. Take a seat, young Skywalker. And so he did, but he did not forgive. The war outside reached crescendo. General Grievous, the cyborg butcher, was hunted. Count Dooku, the fallen Jedi, loomed still. The darkness swelled. And Anakin, now caught between worlds, between doctrines, between futures, could no longer see where he ended and the will of the Force began. Pam noticed the change. He barely slept, barely ate. His eyes, once bright with fire, now flickered with shadow. She asked him what haunted him. He lied, again and again, but she saw it. The man she loved was fading, and something vast, voiceless and waiting, stood in his place. There is a war that no blade can end. It is fought between love and loss, between power and surrender. And Anakin Skywalker, the galaxy's greatest hope, was losing. Chapter 8: The Fall of Count Dooku began aboard a ship swallowed by flame, deep in the Coruscant sky. A kidnapping, a trap, a war's final chord, played in secret. Supreme Chancellor Palpatine held captive. Count Dooku, the executioner. General Grievous, the distraction. And Anakin Skywalker, the blade sent to cut through them all. The Jedi struck hard and fast. He and Obi-Wan boarded the enemy cruiser, cleaving through corridors choked with droids and smoke. The air was thick, with heat and metal, but Anakin's movements were precise, driven. This was not rescue. This was fate grinding toward its hinge. They reached the throne room. Dooku awaited, a Sith Lord, once Jedi, now regal in the rot of fallen grace. He greeted them not with fear, but with familiarity. This time, we will do it together, Obi-Wan said, and Anakin nodded, but something in his heart had changed. The duel was swift and brutal. Dooku was aged, elegant, and deadly. But Anakin had grown, not just in skill, but in hunger. The Force surged in him like a black tide. His blade met Dooku's with fury, not the disciplined strikes of a Jedi, but the wrath of something ancient, newly awake. Dooku faltered. Obi-Wan was knocked unconscious, left crumpled and still. Anakin disarmed the Count. One saber fell, then the other. He held both hilts now, crossed at the Sith's throat, and for the first time in his long, composed life, Dooku knew fear. Palpatine, still shackled, still watching, whispered from the shadows, "Kill him." Anakin hesitated, his breath caught. This was not the Jedi way. This was not justice, it was execution. He cut off your arm. He took your future. Do it. The sabers remained still. His hands trembled. Do it. And Anakin obeyed. Blades crossed. Flesh fell. The Count's head rolled from his shoulders, and silence flooded the chamber like blood in water. For a moment, Anakin stood paralyzed, not with horror, but with the knowledge that the line had been crossed. Not a stumble, a plunge. "I shouldn't have done that," he whispered. But Palpatine's voice was calm, coaxing. "It is only natural. He was too dangerous to be kept alive." The Chancellor was rescued. The ship escaped. Obi-Wan recovered. The war surged on. But Anakin had changed. He had taken a life, not in battle, but in choice. And the Force had not stopped him. He did not confess it to the Council. He did not weep. He buried it beneath duty, beneath smiles, beneath the weight of dreams in which Padmé still died screaming. Later, he would recall the way Dooku's eyes looked in those final moments, not with pride, but with betrayal, as though the Count pawn of Sidious had realized too late that his place in the story was always temporary. A stepping stone. Anakin never knew that Dooku had been meant to fall, that Sidious, Darth Sidious, had already chosen his next apprentice, and that apprentice had just proven himself ready. The Council praised the mission. The Chancellor called him a hero, but the name rang hollow. In his heart, Anakin felt none of the righteousness the Jedi had promised would follow such acts. Only silence, and the slow, spreading cold of what he had become. He returned to Padmé's arms, but even her warmth could not reach the place now frozen within him. He held her close. He whispered that the war would end soon, that peace was near, that their child would grow in a galaxy free of shadows. But he was lying to her, to himself, for Dooku's death was not the end of the war. It was the beginning of something far more ancient, a rite long prepared in darkness. The Sith do not rise in noise and fire. They rise in quiet moments, in whispered permission, in just one choice to far. And Anakin Skywalker had just taken his first true step toward the abyss. Chapter 9. The seed of the Sith Republic, so long frayed, began to tighten its grip. Dooku was dead. Grievous hunted. The Jedi grew hopeful. A dangerous thing, for hope blinds. Hope forgets that poison does not spread with noise, but with stillness, and at the center of that stillness sat Sheev Palpatine. The Sith Lord no longer needed to hide behind shadow. He stood in plain sight, cloaked not in black, but in trust. The galaxy saw a chancellor. The Jedi saw a politician. But Anakin saw a mentor, a friend, a voice that echoed what the Force refused to say. The dark side is not evil. My boy, it is misunderstood. Feared, yes, but it offers power, control, the very tools you need to save the one you love. He spoke of Darth Plagueis, a Sith so powerful he could prevent death. The story fell like ash into Anakin's ears. Dry, soft, irrefutable. Padmé was still dying in his dreams, and the Jedi offered no path to stop it. But Palpatine, Sidious, offered a way. Still, Anakin hesitated. He returned to the temple, walked its grand halls, sat in council chambers. Yet their words felt like echoes now, distant, detached. They spoke of final campaigns, of Grievous, of ending the war. Then came the test. The council, wary at last, asked Anakin to spy on the Chancellor, not as Jedi, but as agent, as traitor. They did not trust Palpatine. They did not trust him. A storm gathered behind Anakin's eyes. He was their chosen one, yet they denied him mastery, denied him counsel, denied him trust. Obi-Wan tried to soothe the wound, but his voice came too late. You are asking me to betray a friend, a mentor. We're asking you to do what is right. But who's right? Jedi right? Republic right? The lines blurred, and in the blur, a seed took root. Anakin returned to Palpatine. The Chancellor no longer whispered. He named himself. I am the Sith, Lord the Jedi seek. Anakin froze. The truth was finally revealed. Not as prophecy, not as vision, but as confession. Palpatine made no move to attack. He simply waited. You know the Jedi will destroy me. You know they are plotting to take over the Republic. I offer you power. I offer you the knowledge to save her. Two voices warred in Anakin's mind. One cried, "Tell the Jedi, obey the code, serve the light." The other murmured, "If you do, she dies." And so, trembling, Anakin left. He reported to Mace Windu. The Masters prepared to arrest the Chancellor. Windu took 3 Jedi with him. Anakin was told to stay behind. But how can a man stay behind when fate stands at the threshold? He waited in the temple, breathing, thinking, burning, and then he rose. He mounted his speeder. The city raced past him, in streaks of color and confusion. His thoughts no longer belonged to him. The Force roared in his veins. Not warning, not clarity, conflict. When he arrived at the Chancellor's office, Windu's blade was drawn. The other Jedi lay dead. Palpatine's face was twisted, his voice a snarl of thunder. He's too dangerous to be left alive. Mace moved to strike. Anakin made his choice. His blade rose and severed Windu's hand. The Jedi Master screamed. Palpatine's lightning surged, and Mace Windu was cast into the abyss. Anakin collapsed, breathless, shaking, ashamed. What have I done? But it was too late. Palpatine approached, slow and certain. You are fulfilling your destiny, Anakin. Become my apprentice. Learn to use the dark side of the Force. Anakin knelt, not in devotion, in despair. I will do whatever you ask, just help me save her. And in that moment, Anakin Skywalker died. Only the shadow remained. Darth Sidious gave him a new name, not with affection, but with design. Darth Vader, and so the seed became root. The chosen one, born of prophecy, became its doom, not through hate alone, but through love, twisted by fear. Chapter 10. The night of Knives' darkness fell not with thunder, but with ritual. The galaxy turned unaware as the Force shuddered, not from war, but from betrayal, long seeded and now blooming. In the highest tower of the Senate, where laws once echoed, a Sith Lord whispered his decree. The Jedi were to be purged. Anakin, now Darth Vader, though the name had not yet scarred his breath, stood silent as Sidious gave the order. Not with fire, not with wrath, with calm, cold precision. Every Jedi is now an enemy of the Republic. The words hung like blades. Do what must be done. And Anakin did not protest. He bowed, not out of reverence, but resignation. The night came quickly. At the temple, younglings waited in silence. The war had drawn the masters away. Only a few knights remained. Guards, librarians, children. They heard the approach of boots, many, clones, in perfect step. And at the center, Anakin Skywalker. They recognized him. They smiled. They believed. The clones aimed. The doors closed, and screams did not leave the walls. He moved like fate incarnate, his saber a red wound tearing through memory. The archives burned. The statues fell. Lights dimmed as the Force itself recoiled. The temple, once a beacon, became a tomb. Even the young, wide-eyed and trembling were not spared. One child stepped forward. Master Skywalker, there are too many of them. Anakin's saber hummed in answer. Elsewhere, the same blade fell across the stars. Order 66. A single phrase pre-coded into every clone. A phrase buried beneath loyalty, triggered by design. And in its echo, Jedi across the galaxy died on Kashyyyk. Masters were shot in the back mid-march. On Felucia, blades fell before sabers could be drawn. On Megiddo, on Cato Nymodia, on Salukami betrayal became doctrine. Only a few survived. Yoda, sensing the tremor, escaped into exile. Obi-1, cast down a cliff by his own troops, crawled from the wreckage of trust, but most fell without understanding why. The Republic cheered. The Senate applauded. Palpatine, his voice amplified across systems, declared that the Jedi had plotted to overthrow him, that the Clone Wars had proven the Republic too fragile for democracy, and thus the Empire was born, not in resistance, but in thunderous approval. Pad marched from the Senate floor, wept in silence. The Republic she fought to protect vanished. In moments, the man she loved vanished with it. She searched for Anakin, found nothing. The temple was cordoned off. The Jedi declared traitors. No records remained. No survivors admitted. But whispers passed through the lower levels of Coruscant, of a cloaked figure bathed in flame, leading soldiers into sacred halls. Podman confronted Obi-Wan. Her voice trembled. Her eyes begged Anakin. He would never, but Obi-Wan's silence broke her. She realized then, not with rage, but with ache, that the man she married had become a myth, a shadow wearing his voice, and still she believed she could reach him. Still she carried his child. Some lights do not extinguish in darkness, they flicker, they endure. But when the wind howls too long, even stars must drown. Anakin did not return home. He stood at the temple's highest window. The city below glowed like fireflies beneath glass, and he, now silent and still, watched it without recognition. Within him the storm had quieted, but not from peace, from surrender. Thus ended the Jedi Order, not with war, but with obedience, with trust broken from within. And in their ashes, the Sith did not rise in conquest. They rose in ceremony. Chapter 11. The Slaughter of Mustafar. Lava world groaned beneath itself, a planet in perpetual agony, where rivers of fire carved paths through blackened stone, and the sky never stopped weeping. Ash. Here, Sidious sent his new apprentice. Here. Anakin Skywalker, now only Darth Vader in breath, if not in form, was to cleanse the last threads of the separatist war, not with treaty, with extermination. Mustafar was where the war would die, and with it, the last tether to the man he once was. He arrived cloaked in silence, the clone battalion waiting at his back. The droid guards of the facility recognized him as an emissary of peace. They led him through gates into polished chambers where the separatist leaders, pale and eager, awaited reward. Newt Gunray, Wat Tambor, Poggle the Lesser, the architects of galactic chaos, stood beneath banners of false power. They smiled as he entered, believed the war was over, believed their survival was guaranteed. Anakin said nothing. He ignited his blade. The massacre was not rushed, one by one. Each leader fell beneath the crimson glow of judgment, not out of rage, but purpose. Their screams echoed against the obsidian walls. The droids stood helpless. Their programming did not account for betrayal in human form. By nightfall, silence reigned. The Confederacy was no more. The war, its fire extinguished, not by treaty, but by execution, was over, and Anakin stood alone, cloaked in ash and blood, the flickering magma outside the only light left to know him. He sent a message to Coruscant. "It is done, my master." Sidious did not praise. He merely confirmed the galaxy now belonged to the Empire. But the Force whispered otherwise. Padmam, desperate and trembling, made her way to Mustafar. She had not seen him since the temple burned. She refused to believe the whispers she believed in him. When she found him, the darkness clung to him like second skin. He embraced her briefly, spoke not in hate, but in certainty. I have brought peace, justice, order. I can overthrow Sidious. We can rule together. His eyes did not plead. They demanded. She stepped back. You're breaking my heart. The words struck deeper than any blade, but not deep enough to pierce what he had become. Then, from the shadows, Obi-Wan emerged, brought not by war, but by palm soap. Anakin's gaze turned to fury. His hand gripped his saber. You brought him here to kill me. And the last thread, the final tie to what once was, snapped. Padme collapsed. Breath stolen not by wound, but by grief. Anakin did not turn to catch her. He turned to kill, and so, on the banks of fire, brother faced brother. The duel was not merely of blades. It was a ritual of ruin, a requiem for prophecy. They clashed across walkways, through furnaces, atop collapsing towers. Metal screamed. Ash fell like rain. The Force roared between them, not to stop them, but to mourn. Obi-Wan begged him to stop, to remember, to return, but there was no Anakin left to hear him. Only Vader, half-born, half-dash burning. And in the end, it was not power that failed him. It was pride. He leapt, reckless. Obi-Wan struck. The blade severed flesh from flame. Legs, arm, gone. Anakin fell to the black sand, screaming in pain and hatred, his body dissolving beneath the heat. Obi-Wan stood over him, tears swallowed by ash. You were the chosen one. You were meant to destroy the Sith, not join them. He could not finish. He left, took the saber, took Padme, and left Vader. Burning, the flames consumed him, not just flesh, but memory and the Force. Wept, thus died Anakin Skywalker, not by enemy hands, but by his own. Consumed not by darkness, but by the fear of losing light. Chapter 12. The birth of Vader. The operating chamber was sterile, cold, lit by beams that hummed without mercy. Metal. Limbs hung from the ceiling like forgotten gods, ready to reshape what fire could not destroy. Darth Sidious stood in the shadows, not as healer, but as midwife to monstrosity. Anakin Skywalker was no longer whole. What the flames of had not claimed, the darkness had already taken. His legs gone, one arm severed, his face scorched and broken. Skin clung to bone like wet cloth. The lungs rasped for air that would never again come easily. But his soul was already sealed. Sidious looked down upon the ruin with satisfaction. He will live. The droids obeyed. They worked in silence, building a shell around the dying core, not to preserve the man, but to cage what remained. Plates of durasteel locked into place. Artificial lungs were fused into his chest. Tubes, wires, breath regulators. A suit not of honor, but survival. A prison with no key. The mask came last. It descended slowly, like the final piece of a ritual as it sealed. The voice of Anakin Skywalker was silenced. A mechanical breath replaced his own, low, hollow, eternal. Darth Vader had risen, not in triumph, in torment. The table tilted. He rose for the first time on legs that were not his own. He did not stumble. The Force held him upright, not with grace, but with rage. Sidious approached. Lord Vader, can you hear me? A moment passed. Then a nod, small, sharp, the dark. Side pulsed through the chamber like a second heartbeat, but even Sidious did not foresee what came next. Where is Pardon? The voice was deeper now, corrupted, mechanical, but the question was human. It pierced through metal and code. Sidious paused, weighed his answer, then spoke with venom masked as sorrow. It seems, in your anger, you killed her. Silence, and then a scream. Not of grief, of ruin. The Force shuddered around him. Panels tore from the walls. Droids crashed to the floor. The very structure of the facility groaned beneath the weight of his pain. Not just from the lie, but from the truth behind it. That he had sacrificed everything, and still lost her. Anakin Skywalker had fallen to the dark side for love. Darth Vader would remain in it for punishment. He did not cry, he did not beg, he breathed, and each breath was a curse. Elsewhere, another birth took place. On Polis Massa, beneath quiet stars, Padma Amidala gave her final breath to twin children, Luke and Leia. She named them in whispers. She did not speak of Anakin. She did not speak of pain, only love. And then, silence. Yoda and Obi-Wan stood over her body. 2 Jedi survivors. 2 lights dimmed. They made a pact in that hour, to separate the twins, to hide them from Sidious, to hide them from him. Leia would go to Alderaan, raised as a princess, a warrior in waiting. Luke would be placed on the very soil that once enslaved his father, Toto 4. The circle was complete. The Empire expanded. Jedi became myth. Vader became shadow. Palpatine stood atop the galaxy like a god of ash, and beside him stood a dark shape, black-armored, silent, merciless. The mask did not blink. It did not smile. It simply endured, and so began the reign of Darth Vader, not as a conqueror, but as a wound that walked, an echo of prophecy twisted into punishment. For the Chosen One had not brought balance, only silence. Chapter 13. The age of purgated temple was gone, its spires shattered, its archives burned. The halls where children once laughed now echoed with silence. Across the stars, Jedi fire had been extinguished, their names forgotten, their deeds erased by decree. But some embers refused to die, and so the galaxy entered the age of purge. It was not a war, it was a ritual. System by system, Sidious sent his new hand, Darth Vader, to extinguish memory. Survivors of Order 66 fled into forgotten sectors, clinging to legends and half-buried hopes. But the shadow found them. Vader hunted without mercy. He moved like a storm, precise, unrelenting. No longer the boy who questioned, no longer the general who inspired. The name Anakin passed from his lips like ash, from a flame long dead. He was the blade now. The Inquisitorius was born from this purpose, a sect of fallen Jedi, twisted by torture and fear, trained in the dark side, molded into hunters. They obeyed Vader, feared him, envied him. He trained them not to think, but to stalk, not to feel, but to break. Each mission was the same: locate the remaining Jedi, offer surrender, then execute. Whether by lightsaber or terror, it did not matter. The Force trembled in silence. Whole planets fell under Vader's gaze. Temples buried beneath stone were unearthed and desecrated. Sacred texts were burned, holocrons shattered. Children with potential were taken, not to be trained, but to be watched, filed, feared. One by one, Jedi were found. Master Luminara, captured, displayed, deceased. Master Ethkoth, tracked, betrayed, slain. 1,000 unnamed knights, cornered in caves, cities, deserts, silenced before their stories could echo. The light flickered, then faded, but not all fell easily. Some fought, some vanished, and others reached out into the Force and vanished themselves. Yoda hid on Dagobah, a planet steeped in life, clouded by shadow. There, he meditated, waited, watched the galaxy decay in stillness. Obi-Wan buried himself in Tatooine's dunes, watching from afar as Luke Skywalker grew beneath twin suns, silent guardian, haunted soul. They did not speak, they did not fight, they endured. Meanwhile, Sidious shaped the galaxy in his image. The Senate became ceremony, the people complacent. Stormtroopers replaced clones, order replaced justice, fear replaced freedom. And Vader grew colder. The suit was no longer pain. It was identity. He did not eat. He did not sleep as men do. He lived in silence, broken only by the hiss of his breath and the hum of his blade. When he walked, worlds listened. When he spoke, voices obeyed. Yet, in his solitude, aboard the obsidian fortress of his starship, within the iron halls of Bast Castle, in chambers where no one dared follow, he would sit in stillness and remember flashes. A lake on Naboo, a smile in a meadow, a child's voice calling his name. He would rage then, crush panels with the Force, shatter walls, silence the past, but it always returned. Because he was not empty, he was haunted by what he had done, by what he had not prevented. The Jedi were gone, their memories smeared across history as traitors, warmongers, failures. But the Force did not forget. It lingered, waiting for balance, for prophecy, for the echo of a breath not yet taken. The darkness cannot erase the light. It can only hide it. And even in the long night of purge, the Force remembers the name that once burned like a twin star. Skywalker. Chapter 14. The ghosts of the Pastine, the depths of deep space, aboard a silent star destroyer, drifting through a forgotten sector. Darth Vader stood alone at the viewport. Stars wheeled past him, distant and indifferent. The galaxy was his to command, yet it offered no comfort, for in every silence the past returned. The Force had no mercy for the fallen, it whispered, it remembered, it showed. Not all Jedi were dead. Some lived not in exile, but in the Force, as phantoms, voices, wounds. And though Vader's blade had silenced their bodies, their spirits lingered like frost on glass. They did not haunt him. They waited one night while meditating within the void chamber of his obsidian quarters. Vader reached into the Force, not seeking, but demanding. He tore through memories, through screams, through silence, through the veil itself, and something answered. Not light, not darkness. Memory. The voice of Obi-Wan. Anakin. What have you become? Vader snarled. The past had no power over him, and yet it did. For in every world he crushed, in every rebel cell he dismantled, in every Jedi he struck down. He felt a flicker of eyes, of innocence, of a name not spoken in years. Anakin. He had abandoned it, murdered it, but the galaxy somehow remembered. Whispers began in the outer rim. Smugglers spoke of a Jedi ghost aiding refugees. Stormtroopers stationed on Lothal reported sightings of blue sabers. Unconfirmed, unbelievable. Vader dismissed them until he felt it. The presence, a pulse in the Force, faint but unmistakable. Kenobi, no planet, no coordinates, just the echo. But even the smallest spark can light a fire. Vader dispatched probes across the rim, not just to seek Obi-Wan, but to erase the final threads of his own humanity. Each Jedi found and slaughtered was another attempt to silence the memory. But memory does not bleed. Within the fortress he had carved into volcanic stone, he kept relics, not of victory, but of before. A lightsaber hilt, scorched and broken. A hollow projector with a single, corrupted message from Padmem. A recording of his mother's voice, half-erased by time. He did not look at them. He felt them, he hated them, and still he could not destroy them. The past had become a spectre. Not a person, not a place, but a weight. And in the black stillness of the Force, deeper than even Vader dared dwell, another truth began to form. He was not the end. There was another, a thread he could not find, a presence just out of reach. Not Jedi, not Sith, young, unrefined, but strong, born from love, hidden by sacrifice, guarded by desert and myth. He did not know the name, not yet, but the Force did it, watched from beyond time. It moved in whispers and veils. It stirred as it had not stirred since the fall of the temple. Something was coming, and Vader, unknowingly, was the shadow it would rise to face. The ghosts of the past do not remain silent forever. They wait, and in the waiting, they become prophecy. Chapter 15. The boy on Tatooine beneath's twin suns, where sand never forgets, and the wind carves stories into stone. A boy watched the sky. He was small, quiet, yet the Force stirred round him. Like dust rising before a storm, Luke Skywalker, born in the shadows of war, hidden in plain sight, raised by moisture farmers who spoke little of the world beyond. He knew nothing of Jedi, of Sith, of empires, but he felt the edges of something larger, something waiting. Tatooine was not kind. The heat blistered, the nights froze. Tusken raiders haunted the dunes, and creatures hunted in the dark. But in that silence, the Force sang to him, not in words, but in wonder. He would stare at the horizon for hours, not out of boredom, out of longing. Something inside him called toward the stars, not for adventure, but for belonging. A voice, older than his own, echoing from a lineage he had never known. And from afar, he was watched. Obi-Wan Kenobi, cloaked in exile, had become Ben, a hermit, a whisper. The villagers mocked him, feared him, but they did not know his purpose. He watched the boy from a distance, not as a protector, alone, but as a guardian of prophecy. For Luke was not merely a child. He was balance, reborn, born of the one who fell. Obi-Wan felt it in his bones, the ticking of destiny, slow and patient. Luke's presence in the Force was not blinding, not wild, but clear. He would bring light, or he would inherit ruin. And far above, drifting through the void in black silence, Darth Vader sensed a tremor. He did not know the source, but he felt it. Something awakening, a flicker in the dark, irritating, insistent, and it pulled at him. Not with clarity, with ache. He dismissed it. He tightened the grip of the Empire, crushed rebellion, dismantled hope. But the Force continued to whisper. In dreams he did not remember. He saw twin suns, a small figure on a ridge, eyes filled with wonder, a name on the wind he could not place. Luke, and in his meditation chamber, where the light could never reach, Vader stirred. He questioned nothing aloud, but the memory of a hand once held, of a son never known, haunted the silence between breaths. Back on Tatooine, Luke raced through the canyons in his landspeeder, laughter trailing behind him like starlight. He had never held a lightsaber. He had never heard the name Skywalker spoken with reverence, but the Force was already watching, already choosing. He would grow, he would struggle, he would reach beyond the stars, and when the time came, the Father would face the Son in the desert silence. The first echo of redemption was born, not in fire, not in fury, in a boy watching the sky, unaware that he was the dream of a galaxy still mourning its fallen light. Chapter 16, The Rebellion, ignites the galaxy smoldered beneath the Empire's fist, its voice silenced, its will bent. Yet in the dark corners of forgotten systems, something ancient stirred, resistance, not loud, not yet, but constant like water beneath stone, shaping the future without form. The rebellion was not born in battle, it was born in whispers. A senator, cloaked in protocol and diplomacy, began to move in secret. Bail Organa, once ally of Jedi, now father of Leia, built the foundations of defiance. Quietly, patiently, he gathered those who remembered the Republic not with nostalgia, but with purpose. Mon Mothma, Raddus, Gambel, Iblis. These were not warriors, they were believers, and Leia, the child of flame and ash, became their spark. Raised in Alderon's high towers, she wore her heritage like armor, nobility forged by love, politics sharpened by truth. The Force whispered. In her blood, though she did not yet know its name, she stood in Senate halls and spoke against tyranny. Her voice cut through lies like a blade without needing steel. And across the stars, her brother, unknown, unnamed, watched twin suns sink below a ridge, unaware of the fire awakening within his name. But the Empire saw, it always saw, and Vader, who crushed uprisings before they bloomed, began to feel unease. The dark side did not speak plainly, but it stirred, not in anger, in uncertainty. The Death Star, a construct of unspeakable power, neared completion. It was no longer war they prepared for, it was erasure. One station to silence all hope, but hope is not so easily smothered. A single group of spies, ragged and broken, stole its secret, blueprints of destruction, and into Leia's hands they were placed. A mission, a prayer, a prophecy reborn, deliver them to Kenobi. The name echoed in her mind like a story half remembered. She did not know that the man she sought had once cradled her as a newborn, that he had knelt beside her dying mother, that he had watched her father burn and fall. She only knew this. If the Empire was a god of shadow, the Jedi were the forgotten angels meant to cast it down, and Obi-Wan was the last. On Tatooine, the call came. Leia's message, carried by a droid built by the hands of her father, crossed the sands to find him. R2-D2, loyal, unyielding, and with him C-3PO. A golden relic from a past even Vader had forgotten. Obi-Wan. Exile ended the moment he heard her voice. Help me, Obi-Wan Kenobi. You're my only hope. He did not hesitate. He would train the boy. He would prepare the future. He would face the past. Luke, wide-eyed and restless, followed the path laid before him, not by choice, but by destiny's hand. The Force had waited long enough, and in the black silence of his meditation chamber, Vader breathed in thunder. He did not yet know the name, but soon he would. The rebellion was not born to win. It was born to remind the stars that light still exists, and from the spark of a girl on a diplomatic ship, the fire began to rise. Chapter 17. Duel of the Forgotten. The walls of the Death Star hummed with the hunger of power unbound. Its corridors stretched like veins through a living machine, every surface cold, every breath monitored. It was not a fortress, it was a graveyard waiting to be filled, and into it walked Obi-Wan Kenobi, cloaked, silent. His steps echoed not in metal, but in memory. He was older now, slower, but the Force flowed through him like a river beneath ice. He had come not only to rescue, not only to protect, he had come to finish what had been left undone. Leia was aboard. The plans were aboard. And so was he. Vader.Obi-1 felt him before he saw him. A presence so vast and cold, it dimmed the very air. Not fire, not rage, silence. A silence made from the death of love. He let the others go, Luke, Leia, Solo, a princess, a smuggler. A boy with a name that once belonged to stars, and then he turned back. He walked alone through the cold halls, and there, in the darkness between gates, the shadow waited. Darth Vader. The last time they met, it was on a world of fire. Now it was in the hollow heart of steel. He stepped forward, cloaked in armor and breath that hissed like a machine trying to dream. The circle is now complete. Vader said, voice cold and full of destiny. When I left you, I was but the learner. Now I am the master. Obi-Wan did not flinch. Only a master of evil. Darth the sabers ignited, one blue. One red dot, not symbols of sides, symbols of memory. Their blades clashed with the weight of years. But it was not rage that drove Kenobi's strikes. It was sorrow, it was closure. He did not fight to win, he fought to witness, to stand before what Anakin had become and offer, with every breath, the last of his faith. They moved, slowly, deliberately, not like young warriors, but like two myths rehearsing the end of an era and watching from afar. Was Luke.Obi-1 saw him, felt him, knew in that moment that the future had arrived. Vader's blade pressed hard. The old master staggered, but he smiled. If you strike me down, I shall become more powerful than you can possibly imagine. And then he raised his blade in surrender. No defense, no resistance, only peace. Vader's saber fell. The robe collapsed. No body, only light. And Vader, victorious, stood alone. But he had not won, for, in Luke's scream, raw, sudden, familiar, the Force stirred. The son had seen the father, and the past had returned. The escape proceeded. The rebels fled. The Death Star did not fire. Not yet, but something had been set into motion. Luke held the saber. Obi-Wan had given him Dodder's father's blade. He did not yet know what it meant, only that it felt right in his hands. Vader, aboard the station, stood. Without speaking, he had struck down his former master, and gained nothing. No clarity, no peace, only memory. Only the voice of the man who once called him brother, Anakin. Don't try it. You were my brother. You were the chosen one. The saber was not heavy, but the truth behind it was. The duel had ended, but the war within had only begun. And in the breath of a fallen master, a boy had awakened, and a father had stirred beneath the mask. Chapter 18. The return of the lighting, the shadow of stars. As rebellion rose and fell like breath, the Force began to awaken fully, not in the heart of a warrior, nor in the blade of a Jedi, but in the soul of a boy who had never asked to be anything more than a farmer, Luke Skywalker. He had seen death. He had held a weapon older than his lifetime. He had stared into the visor of a stormtrooper and known fear. And yet, in all of this, he had not turned away. He had answered. The galaxy called him a rebel. The Force called him something else. He trained not in temples, but in shadows, guided by echoes, first by Obi-Wan's disembodied voice, then by the last true Jedi, Yoda, frail in body, but not in spirit. Hidden in the swamp world Dagobah, where life and decay were one, Yoda completed the legacy of a broken order. He spoke not of strength, he spoke of stillness. He did not teach victory, he taught surrender to the Force, to the self, to truth. Luke listened, but within him a question lingered. "Who is my father?" he asked, and the truth was a wound. "Your father was seduced by the dark side of the Force. He ceased to be Anakin Skywalker and became Darth Vader." The words did not land like lightning. They sank. Anakin, the name that haunted silence, was not dead. He was Vader. Luke shook beneath the weight of it, not in hatred, in sorrow, for he had felt it, that presence aboard the Death Star, that hollow breath, that broken man in Black Dot. It had felt like kin. The galaxy waged war. The rebellion struck at the Empire's throat. Death Stars fell. Systems rallied. The tide shifted. But Luke, he turned inward. He did not dream of conquest. He dreamed of redemption. Vader felt it. He stood beside Sidious, the Emperor, the serpent crowned in rot, but his thoughts were elsewhere. He watched the stars. He listened to reports. He searched. The boy. He had his name. He had his face, but not yet his future. And when they met again, not as strangers, but as shadows drawn to flame, Vader offered cold clarity. Obi-Wan never told you what happened to your father. He told me enough. He told me you killed him. A silence, then truth. No, I am your father. The scream Luke released did not come from his lungs. It came from his spirit. The galaxy fractured in that cry, not from pain, but from recognition. He escaped. He survived, but he understood. Not everything broken stays broken. Not every monster is born monstrous. And not every prophecy is a lie. Luke returned. Not with armies, with mercy. He surrendered, walked into Vader's grip, not to destroy him, but to save him. There is still good in you. I've felt it. The Emperor laughed. Vader did not. The throne room aboard the second Death Star became a crucible. Lightning filled the air. Luke refused the dark. Sidious roared, and Vader chose. The hand that once slaughtered children now rose, not in violence, but in defiance. He seized the Emperor, lifted him, and cast him down. Screams fell into fire. Light returned, but so too did the price. The lightning had torn through him. The suit failed. The breath stilled, and at last, beneath the mask, Anakin Skywalker returned. Let me look on you with my own eyes. And Luke removed the mask. There was no monster, only a man burned, broken, but free. You were right. You were right about me. Tell your sister, you were right. Then silence. Anakin died, but not in darkness, in light, in his son's arms. The Force trembled, not in grief, but in balance. The Chosen One had fulfilled the prophecy, not by strength, not by hatred, but by love, and so the Sith were broken, the Jedi reborn. The night ended, not with flame, but with forgiveness. And across the stars, the name Skywalker no longer echoed in fear, but in hope. Epilogue. the eternal force, the war ended. The Empire fell. The Death Stars shattered into dust, and the last cries of tyranny were swallowed by stars. Across the galaxy, people emerged from hiding. Statues toppled, chains broken. The night was over, but the Force was never about war. It was never about empire or republic or sabers drawn in righteous cause. It was always waiting. Luke Skywalker stood alone upon Ender's quiet hill. The pyre before him, lit with fire, not of hatred, but release. The armor of Darth Vader crackled and crumbled, but within it, the soul of Anakin Skywalker ascended. Not as a Sith, not as a Jedi, as balance. And from the shadows, 3 spirits watched, Obi-Wan Kenobi, Yoda, Anakin, reborn in form, unscarred, not as he died, but as he was. Before the fall, smiling, at peace. The Force does not forget, but neither does it punish forever. It bends, it waits, it teaches through pain, and when the cycle completes, it sings. The Jedi were gone, but not lost. The Sith defeated, but not erased. For the Force is neither good nor evil. It is the breath between stars, the silence between waves, the memory between lives. Luke, now last of the Jedi, would go on to rebuild, to remember, to teach, not just with sabers, but with truth. Leia would walk both paths, royalty and warrior, light and strength. Her blood carried Skywalker's legacy, though her spirit was always her own. The galaxy healed slowly, imperfectly, because peace is not a gift. It is a discipline, and the Force remains. It whispers in the wild places. It lingers in the eyes of children not yet trained. It waits in caves, in trees, in stones that once sang with light. It echoes in dreams, in pain, in hope. It is not a weapon, it is a mirror, and within that mirror, the face of Skywalker will forever be seen, the slave who rose, the knight who fell, the shadow that redeemed itself, a prophecy fulfilled not by power but by compassion. This is the mythology of the Force, a sacred wound, a circle eternal, a truth that cannot die. As long as stars burn and breath is drawn, the name will be remembered. Skywalker, *, sleep now, listener. Let the Force carry you as it did him, for even in endings we return, always, to the beginning.